Hello, my name is Wuju Senchi, and today I'm bringing you a Master Yi Season 11 build guide. Um, Forgive me also if my voice might sound a little weird. I am a little bit sick right now, but I really did want to make this video. I've been wanting to make it for a long time now, and I have some interesting builds for all of you to check out. So another reason I really wanted to just get this out as soon as possible. So hopefully you can forgive me if my voice sounds a little weird. It might crack a little bit here and there. We'll make it work. But I'm really excited to make this guide and share some of the builds that have been working for me in solo queue recently and teach y'all how to use it. So I'm going to hide my webcam here so you can see the slides and we'll begin. Okay, so first thing I want to tell you is that I am making so I previously had a Google Doc. I made videos in the past about, Master Yi builds and stuff, and I was also making a Google Doc, like updating it constantly on, what I thought were the best Yi builds and runes and stuff. So I've stopped updating that Google Doc, and now I have a spreadsheet. So if you want the spreadsheet that I'm updating right now, which has all the builds that I'm talking about in this video, as well as lots of other stuff on there. I have all of that. You can see it for free, and it's at this URL here. I'll put in the description below this video, but it's short url.at/tzikt. I'm pretty sure that's an I. But yeah, so you can see all this stuff on that spreadsheet, and I'll be updating it constantly. So even, weeks after this video, months after this video, I'll still be updating it and trying to keep it as up to date as possible with the stuff that I think is best for Yi. So check that out. But yeah, we can keep going here. So basically a summary of the 4 builds I'll be talking about today. There's 2 that most of you probably know about if you play Yi, or if you see what Yi, if you're used to seeing Yi in your solo queue games, you probably see them all building pretty much this same stuff, which is Kraken on hit. That's the standard Kraken on hit build, and then the Duskblade one-shot build. That's this also standard version of that. So those 2 builds, I do think both of them are, they have their strengths, and I think, I'll talk about them in a bit. I still think both of them are great and really, like, in the right game, it's a good build to climb with. But that said, there are 2 other builds I've been using recently, Eclipse Assassin and Kraken Titanic Tank, that I've also been having a lot of success with, and I've told other Yi mains about it, both low elo and high elo, and other Yi mains have also really been loving these builds. So I'm excited to share those with you, because I really feel like there's builds that either no one has tried at all, or have only been tried by a few Yi mains and are kind of sleeper OP. So anyway, we will get into those. So the first one, your typical standard bread and butter Kraken on hit build. This one is a Kraken rush into Wit's End second item. And I know Wit's End will be getting nerfed probably I think it's in the next patch, so within a couple of days of this video being released probably. But even so, I think Wit's End second item will still be good, especially with Yi. So I wouldn't worry about the nerfs. It still should be good as a second item. I don't think we would rush it. If you were rushing Wit's End first item on Yi, probably don't. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that anymore. But anyway, yeah, second item's still great. So it's Kraken, Wit's End, Rageblade, and Sterax. This is the core build for this standard Kraken on hit build, and it's extremely consistent. It's the build that Scenario, otherwise known as Scenarius, and I've made a video on him in the past. He's probably the best Master Yi in the world right now, and he's a challenger Master Yi player on EU West, and other Yi mains. Lots of other Yi mains use this build. It's pretty much the closest thing to the Season 10 Master Yi build, and it's very, kind of normal. It makes the most sense. It works with a lot of different rune setups. Hail of Blades is what Scenarius uses. That's also what I usually use, and I think it is probably the best, but that doesn't mean you can't take Lethal Tempo or Conquer with this build. I actually like running Lethal Tempo with this build against more tanky comps, but again, that's just my opinion, and I don't think there's there's no definite right answer. You should try what you like, and if you find what works for you, stick with it. But if you want to take my advice and Scenarios advice, Hail Blades is probably the best thing to use. You never lack damage with this build. With Kraken, Wits, and Rageblade, you will always have enough damage to kill anything and anyone. And even with squishies, you can still almost one-shot them. It's close to a lethality build, you know? You still almost one-shot squishies, especially with Hail Blades. And there's a lot of situation items you could build here. Death Stance, really, really good against AD comps. Mortal Reminder, I think, is a pretty important item to build, especially if they have a lot of healing, obviously. Spirit Visage, I think, is another kind of slept-on item that a lot of E mains. I don't see them. I don't see it built. I don't see them build it that often, but it has really like perfect synergy with Sterax because it amplifies shielding and healing. So if you have Sterax and you get a Spirit Visage right after it, that's always a really, really good combo. Randuin's obviously good against crit and you know, in your face AD champions. GA and Zanya's both great options for you know, when you just want to not get one shot. I think QSS, specifically Silvermere Dawn, is also another slept on item. That, yeah, the tenacity it gives you is really good. Anathema's Chains, another new item that's introduced recently that I think can be sleeper OP. I think is another option you can consider in the right game. But, yeah, I mean, it's not the kind of thing I'd build every game either. Anyway, here are the cons of this build. It can take a little bit of time for it to come online. Just Kraken by itself, I feel like, you know, it's good. It gives some really good damage, but it doesn't give any defense capability at all. And Wit's End also, you know, it gives magic resist, but you know, aside from that, you're pretty much just building offensive items for 3 items until your 4th item Sterax. So you're pretty vulnerable to getting one shot. If the enemy has a lot of AD, you know, you can get tabbies, but I guess they're called steel plated, I don't know, steel caps, whatever they're called. But yeah, other than that, you can't get a lot of armor and magic resist and a lot of HP until later on. So it can take a little bit of time to come online, and to, I guess in particular, you're lacking a lot of tankiness. So that's something you got to be careful about. And it isn't, even though it does, like, especially with Hail Blades, it does do a lot of damage to squishies very quickly, it's still not the best build for one-shotting squishies. There's a lot of builds that I think blow up squishies basically instantly, a lot faster than this build. So that's another con. Okay, so this is the standard Duskblade one-shot build that a lot of Yi mains have loved since Duskblade came out this season. A lot of Yi mains have been climbing with it and being able to kind of abuse the stealth to do things with Yi that you couldn't do before. You know, in some ways it's kind of an elo inflated build in my opinion. Like, if you abuse this build and like, I guess it's not as OP now, but definitely before they nerf Yi's Q and all of these damage items, like back then it was a pretty stupid OP build in my opinion. So, you know, even now sometimes it can feel elo inflated, like it's just not fair. Anyways, I guess I'm rambling here, but basically the point is, in the right game, it's still broken because of the insane damage one-shot ability it gives you and the permanent invisibility you can get from just one-shotting squishy to squishy to squishy. But again, I really think it only works in the right game. So I think you always take Hail Blades with this build. You don't take anything else. Nothing else is going to be nearly as good in my opinion. But yeah, here's the thing. You need to itemize this build to one-shot easily. So if you're building, like, let's say they have a bunch of shield champions on the enemy team and you don't build a Serpents, you will probably find a lot of the time you are not able to one-shot the people you want to one-shot because they're Lulu and their Karma and their Yumi or whatever. They're all like shielding and healing the champion you're trying to one-shot, and then you die because you couldn't one-shot them. So I really think it's important to build things like Serpents versus shields, LDR versus armor. Someone on your team should have healing reduction if they have a lot of healing on their team, like a Soraka, you know? Things like that. If you aren't building these items and you just autopilot build the same thing every game, you may find yourself regretting it later and struggling to one-shot people, which is absolutely essential in this build. You need to just 1 or 2 tap people with this build, or else it really feels bad. Again, that's just my opinion, but maybe you have a different opinion, and that's fine. So I really think this build only works against 3+ squishies. It has to be at least 3 squishies, ideally 4 to 5, and they have to all be champions that can easily be one-shotted, including late game. So that means an example of a squishy champion that cannot get one-shot very easily is Tryndamere. Obviously, Tryndamere can ult and then you cannot one-shot him. Kindred also, unless she's really bad. Usually you'll try to one-shot her and she'll ult, and then you can't one-shot her either. And then after her ult expires, you'll get CC'd and die. So these are examples of champions that are squishy, but they are not easily one-shot at all. Also champions like Vayne, who was stealth, or Kha'Zix. Any AP champions that can build Zhonya's, like a Fizz. I mean, a lot of these champions are squishies, but or like a Kale. Yeah, lots of other champions with Zhonya's stealth and vulnerability or other bullshit that's going to ruin your day. That really, really makes a Duskblade build really bad against those kinds of champions, in my opinion. So overall, I think the Duskblade build, it's a really coin flippy and inconsistent build, in my opinion. And it's one of those builds that you can be like 20-0 with the build and still lose, which I think feels awful. I think, it's less consistent than other builds. But that said, don't take my word for it. Try it in your own games. And, I mean, if you're watching this and you're a Yi main, you probably already have tried this build a lot, and you probably already know if you like it or not. And some people love it, some people swear by it, and other people like me really don't like it. So of course, you should stick with what works for you. But I'm telling you right now, I think there are better and more consistent lethality builds than the Duskblade build, which I'm going to get into right now. The Eclipse Assassin build. This build I discovered, the story behind this. So I thought of a build kind of similar to this, where it used Eclipse and kind of mix and match items after Eclipse a really long time ago, back in like the beginning of season 11, and it was a build I found like pretty good success with back then. Then they nerfed Eclipse and I stopped using it. But recently, and I think this happened after I realized I wanted to build lethality items in a lot of games where the enemy team had a lot of squishies, but I also didn't want to build Duskblade. So I thought about that more and was thinking, maybe I'll give the Eclipse build a try again. I want something that one-shots squishies, something that's going to be good against a lot of squishy champions, but is not going to be so coin flippy. So that's what this build is. It's my current favorite build against squishies, especially if any of them are a little bit difficult to one-shot, and I can't always get that invisibility from Duskblade off, This build I think is a really good alternative. So I always take Hailblades with this build. And I guess the real, one of the main things about this build that makes it work so well is Eclipse is just an insanely well-rounded and powerful one-item power spike. And this is something that, I think I guess a lot of people don't, for one thing, I just never see any other Yi mains take this item, so clearly a lot of people don't, I guess just not thinking about all the things it gives you, but it's really an overloaded item. It gives AD, lethality, and Omnivamp, which is super nice on Yi. It gives a 2-hit percent HP burst damage, so it's kind of like a Spellblade proc, except instead of one auto attack, it's, two damage things. So just a Q and one auto attack will proc Eclipse, the percent HP burst damage it gives. It also gives movement speed on that proc and a shield that scales off your AD. So that's six things that Yi loves all in one item. I don't know. I think it's kind of silly that we don't see Yi mains building it more often. But anyway, on top of that, it also scales really well into late game because of the armor penetration it gives per legendary item. So because of all of this, Eclipse gives you a little bit of everything that you need, and that means that with just Eclipse, you already kind of have enough damage to one-shot squishies. You're not going to necessarily one-shot them as fast as if you had Duskblade Collector ER/IE, right? But you'll still be able to blow up squishies with just Eclipse, and after that, it really opens up your options. Of course, you're going to want to still build items that give you some kind of damage, right? You don't want to just suddenly build full tank. But after Eclipse, there's a lot of things you can build, and it works. That's because Eclipse is such a well-rounded item that gives you so much of the things that Yi wants. But just on its own, it already does a lot of the things Yi needs to do, and it's not for example, with Duskblade, that build, you need to one-shot people, right? You absolutely need to one-shot people or the build is useless. So you need to just stack tons and tons of burst damage, like Collector, ER, IE, or else the build sucks. And with Kraken, also, similarly, that build really requires you to, get lots of Kraken auto attacks off. So you need lots of attack speed items. You want some tankiness, but the attack speed more important, right? So after Kraken, you have to rush like Rage Blade and Wit's End and all these attack speed items, and then work on your tankiness. Basically what I'm trying to say is I think other builds really force you to build certain things after it, but Eclipse doesn't. So yeah, another thing I'm getting at here is because Eclipse is versatile, you can take advantage of a lot of gold efficient items that would be good on Yi if you had the luxury of being more versatile in your builds, but other builds usually can't take advantage of those items. So let me explain. Okay, I guess I should actually explain what the build is. So after Eclipse, usually what I think is the best item after Eclipse is ER. Eclipse has a 2-hit % burst damage, kind of like a Spellblade effect, right? And if you get ER right after that, you combine those two to get a really powerful explosive burst damage like combo, I guess. So Eclipse plus ER, if you do a Q into an auto attack on someone, you'll be doing like tons of burst damage to them because of Eclipse and ER, their passives. So I think those two items together are really, really nice. And of course, you'll also be proccing your movement speed and shield after that Q and auto attack. Or if you don't Q them, you can just hit them twice with an auto attack, and that works too. After that, I think if you don't care what you get after that, you can get what's it called, Navori Quick Blades. Navori Quick Blades is something that most Yi mains don't build right now, and for good reason. I don't think it's an item that Yi really needs. But here's the thing about it: it's actually very cost efficient. If you look it up on the wiki, it's something like 109% cost efficiency, and it gives a lot of stats Yi likes, like 60 AD. Like 30 ability haste or something, and the passive is still really nice on you, right? Like we're not complaining about getting resets in our Q and E and stuff. So those items together make it so that if you were to get Eclipse, ER, and Navori, you get tons of haste and lots of like raw AD and just explosive damage, and yeah, it's just overall really nice setup. But like I said, you can go so many different things with this build. You could go Eclipse ER into like whatever you want after that. You could get Serpent's Fang for against shields. I think that's really like important to do if they have shields. LDR if they have a lot of armor. Maybe they're squishies but they build armor. Like Graves is a squishy that stacks a lot of armor, so you might want LDR against someone like him. More Reminder again against a lot of healing champions, really good. IE really obviously great item when you have that 60% crit. Bloodthirster can work. I haven't built Bloodthirster that often, but I think you could. You can even get Kempunk Chainsword for a little bit of tankiness, but also getting heal reduction. PD to give you movement speed and just more attack speed. Collector sure can work with this build too. Even what's this item called? Stormrazor. You never see emails build Stormrazor, but with this build I really think it works because it's about like explosive burst damage one shot, right? With Eclipse passive and ER passive. So slap a Stormrazor on that too, and you really can just one shot people and slow them on top of it with Stormrazor. You can also build a lot of different defensive items. You could build Edge of Night. You could build Stacks, GAs, Anya's, QSS if you need it, Death Stance if you need it. And there's really like even tons more options that aren't even on the screen right now that I think work with this build. And like I said, you could even do all of that skipping ER if you want. You could go Eclipse straight into Serpents or Eclipse straight into, I don't know, like sometimes I go Eclipse straight into Mortal Reminder. I feel like they have tons of healing. There's so many different options, and you could build other tanky items as well. Obviously, I don't think you want to build full tank, but like you could build things like Anathema's Chains or just like whatever you need. So overall, I think this build is safer and less coin flippy than other builds, especially better than the Duskblade build, because again, Eclipse gives you so much of what you need and it scales well as well. Even if you're behind, there's a lot of times I'll start off a game and I want to go lethality because they have a lot of squishes on the enemy team, but then I get behind early game. I start off like 0-3 because of some unlucky plays, After that, I feel really, if I were to go Duskblade starting 0-3, it would feel pretty bad because it's pretty hard to one-shot people when I'm going to be behind the whole game, right? But Eclipse is not like that. Even if you're behind, I think it's really easy to come back into the game just because of the overloaded stats Eclipse gives you and how it scales well into the game, into late game. The only real con to this build is I think it's not that good at shredding tanks. And of course, I think you need to itemize correctly. You need to like be capable of looking at the enemy champions and your allies and just looking at the game and thinking, okay, what item do I need right now? If if the enemy team has lots of shields and no one on your team is building Serpent's Fang, you should be able to identify that Serpent's Fang is what you should be building next. Things like that. So yeah, it's not as much of like a brainless build the same thing every single time, every single game kind of strategy. So I guess that's the other con. But like, other than that, I really think there are no cons to this build. Again, I don't think you pick it in a game where there's tons of tanks in the enemy team. It's really not good at shredding tanks, even though Eclipse has a percent HP burst damage thing in it. But yeah, like you should not pick this build if enemy team has a lot of tanks. And if they don't have a lot of tanks and there's a lot of squishes in the enemy team, I really think this build does wonders. Yeah, especially because Eclipse, super well-rounded, gives you the great offensive capabilities of all those different things, plus movement speed, plus a shield. It's like a mini Sterax you're getting just off the first item you build. Anyway, I could go on and on. I love this build. Give it a try. I'm not going to guarantee that you'll pop off with it in your first couple games with it, right? It might take some getting used to, but so far everyone I've told about it that has given it enough of a try has ended up really liking it. You'll find that the Eclipse ER burst damage combo it feels really good, and you get a lot of, and like, yeah, anyway, I'll just let you try it. I do recommend it though, and I love this build. Okay, last build I'll talk about today is the Kraken Titanic tank build. So, full disclosure, this build is not something I completely invented on my own. There was another Yi main who kind of popularized a tanky playstyle with pretty much this the same first items, with Kraken into Titanic, into Sterax, into Gargoyles. I think was their kind of bread and butter recommended build for this. And that was I think they were a D2 Yi main. And that build was really popular at one point, and then I think it kind of fell off, as in like people stopped building it. I don't really see anyone build it anymore, including the guy who invented it. But I recently, again, after I thought about the Eclipse build and was trying that, and I was really enjoying how Eclipse was giving me that shield and that tankiness early game. But then there were games where I was like, dang, I really wish I had even more tankiness early game, because especially in this meta, there's so much burst damage, and it feels like it's hard to not get one shot and to actually be able to do anything in fights. So I thought about it, well, if I invented this Eclipse build, let me think about other builds that maybe other Yi mains aren't trying. And so I thought about Titanic second item, and then I remembered that there's another Yi main who thought of a build similar to this. Basically, long story short, I think this build is really good when the enemy team has a ton of CC and knockups, like lots of burst damage that's both AD, AP, true damage, just like it's multiple kinds of damage, so you can't, stack one kind of defensive stat to mitigate it. It's like really hard to avoid getting bursted, really hard to avoid getting CC'd and knocked up, and maybe they have other BS that's like hard to deal with, like they have Zanyas and, dashes and things that like really make it annoying for you to try to kill them. Basically, if the enemy team is like really, really annoying to face, I think this build works wonders. So I think this build works with multiple rune setups. I really like Conqueror with it because, again, it's about, making fights last longer, so you're not getting one shot. You actually get time to do something. So I think Conqueror shines in fights like that. But it definitely works with things like Lethal Tempo or Halo Blades. For example, if the enemy team has lots of, like, let's say they have lots of CC, lots of burst damage, but a lot of them are not super tanky, kind of squishy, Halo Blades works really well in those kind of games. Again, just try what works for you, but I like Conqueror with this build. It still does tons of damage. I really mean like tons of damage, especially with Titanic and all the extra damage it gives you with tanky items. If you didn't know, Titanic Hydra gives you more AD and more on-hit damage the tankier you are. So it's kind of nice in that regard. And especially versus squishies, you will still be exploding them while they can barely tickle you, you know? So it's a really nice build in those kind of situations. It can become literally impossible to one-shot you if you build correctly here. I think one of the best ways to shut down Yi is to just one-shot him before he can do anything. And especially if you have CC to disrupt his W, then yeah, usually you can one-shot him and then that's it. He can't do anything about it, you know? He doesn't have tools to stop that from happening. But this build can solve that problem. When the enemy team has all those tools to one-shot you, you can prevent that with this build, and if you itemize correctly. So what I mean by if you build correctly, that means if the enemy team doesn't have Serpent's Fang, it's really good to get things like Sterax, Gargoyles, and maybe a Spirit Visage too. Because like all those items together will make it so that you get like a 2,000, 3,000, like just an insanely huge shield that makes it just impossible for you to be one shot. You know, like yeah, there's a 99.99% of games they will never be able to one shot you with items like that. However, because a lot of champions are building Serpent's Fang these days, you need to also not like you don't want to build those shielding items if the enemy has Serpent's Fang. Serpent's Fang I think is getting nerfed next patch. They're lowering the lethality on it. That said, especially in higher elos, they will still be building serpents against enemy like if they're facing champions with a lot of shielding. So if they see you building things like Sterax and Gargoyles, most enemies that aren't low elo will build serpents against you. So if the enemy has like a Talon, or I don't know, like any champions that are going to build lethality, I would recommend not building these shielding items like Sterax and Gargoyles. You need to build things more like, you know, Randuins or Anathemas. I think another really good item is Hullbreaker. Hullbreaker is another one of those items that's very cost efficient, like insanely cost efficient right now, and they're only going to buff it next patch. If you're alone, it gives you tons of armor and MR, as well as HP and AD, whether or not you're alone or not. And also, it's an item it's cost efficient even if you're not alone, even if you're not getting the extra armor and MR that it offers you. Yeah, it's just kind of an insanely hidden OP item, I think, and Yi can definitely take advantage of it, especially with this tank build. So yeah, if they have Serpent's Fang, you avoid shield items and you build more just, you know, defensive stats and HP, like armor and MR. Death Dance, really good item against these Serpent's Fang assassins who are going to be AD champions, right? If they're building Serpent's Fang, they're an AD assassin. Unless you're Tyler 1, but that's a story for another time. But yeah, AD assassins, Death Dance works really well against those kind of champions, so you could build that. Yeah. Let's see. It's really good for when you know the enemy team is going to focus you, and on top of that, your team doesn't have tanks or enchanters to peel you. So again, it's like those games where you feel like, dude, Master Yi is unplayable in this game. The enemy team has Alistar, Yasuo, like Veigar, Talon, like all these champions that are just going to CC me and one-shot me. This build really comes in clutch in those kinds of games. And your team doesn't have the tanks or the Lulu, Soraka, whatever, those champions that are going to help keep you alive. So yeah, really good in those kinds of games. You can build damage items with this build. I think usually what I recommend is if you're going this build, you want to go Kraken into Titanic into tank items, those defensive items there. But there are times where like you're already tanky enough with maybe just like Kraken Titanic Sterax, and you don't, you know, you feel like you actually want more damage. You definitely can do that. You can build Black Cleaver. I think that works really well with this build, because it gives you HP, movement speed, and armor shred, which lets you do more damage with your Titanic. Rageblade can work well as well. Rageblade with Titanic is great. Wit's End against AP champions, you know, it's still a broken item overall. Wit's really cost efficient even after the nerfs this upcoming patch. Great with Yi. You can definitely build that against a lot of AP damage. But yeah, generally I recommend building defensive items. The only con of this build... Oh, sorry, excuse me. The only con of this build is, like I said, it is... Or I don't think I said this, but basically it does do less damage than other builds. I don't think anyone's surprised to hear that. Like, you still do tons of damage, especially to squishies, but yes, it's not one-shotting people quite like a lethality build. It's not shredding tanks in seconds like a, on-hit Kraken build, but it still does tons of damage, and it's like, you'll do, and in a way, you can think of it this way: if you get one shot, then yeah, you probably did no damage. But if you don't get one shot, you'll probably end up doing more damage if you stay alive, right? Staying alive and not dying is doing more damage. So that's why in games where you're facing these kinds of annoying enemy teams, this build will let you do more in the game. If you don't get one shot, you can actually stay alive long enough to kill people, get resets, and stay in the fight. So yeah, it does less damage, but at the same time, you might end up doing more damage with this build than if you were to go something that is going to get you one shot. Anyway, so I think that finishes the build part of this video. I just wanted to include like two last slides in this video about kind of just some general advice or like things that people ask me about. So first thing, Zombie Ward versus Eyeball Collection. This is kind of like a maybe it seems random to you that I'm talking about this, but a lot of people ask me about it. I've been running Zombie Ward since like season 8. I almost never take Eyeball Collection unless I'm playing laney. Zombie Ward, when I'm jungling, I always take it over Eyeball Collection. And people always ask me why you do that. So I'm going to explain now, because it takes some explaining. Basically, Zombie Ward and Eyeball Collection, they both stack and give the same adaptive force, which is I think 30, but it's 18 AD when you fully stack it. Both Eyeball Collection and Zombie Ward require 10 stacks. So Eyeball Collection, that's 10 kills or assists. Zombie Ward, it's 10 wards or like assist kills on wards, and I'll explain that in a second. So they're both the same in that regard, right? They give the same value. They stack the same speed with the number of stacks, and they give the same AD when fully stacked. But here's the thing: Eyeball Collection gives you literally nothing but the AD you get from stacking it, right? Zombie Ward gives you that and gives you tons of free vision, okay? You've probably heard so many people say how vision is how you win games of League of Legends, right? And maybe you don't believe that, or maybe you do, but I think it's difficult to argue with the fact that getting tons of free vision is like better than not getting anything. In the games that I always take Zombie Ward, so in my games I'm almost always getting the highest vision score out of anyone on my team, including my support, who's supposed to be the one getting highest vision score because of their warding. I usually get just as much vision score as them, or even higher, just because of Zombie Ward. It really spots, like, it does so much to give your team tons of vision and spot out tons of people, and also you can, like, whenever you clear a ward and it leaves a zombie ward behind, that's just extra vision to help protect your laners from getting ganked. There's so many nice things about it, right? Here's the thing about it, though, that I want to say is that it requires that your enemies actually are warding, right? So if you play in, I'd say if you play in like low plat or below, in lower elos, Zombie Ward is not as good because the enemy team is just not warding very often, so you can't stack it that often. So I think it's more of a high elo thing, but if you do play in plat plus elo, I think Zombie Ward is not only really good and really useful to use to get that vision, and your teammates will actually make use of it, hopefully. It's also, I think, easier to stack because Eyeball Collection requires that you're getting 10 kills or assists, you know, quickly, right? You want to get that thing stacked as quickly as possible, but it can be pretty difficult to get 10 kills or assists unless it's a Fiesta, right? Master Yi is usually a farming jungler, not like a Lee Sin or a Elise, right? Usually. So you're not usually going to get 10 kills or assists really quickly, but you might very easily clear 10 wards, you know, because people are always warding, especially in higher elos, and clearing wards is something you can do like without taking risks, and you can keep farming while you're doing that. So it fits with Master Yi's playstyle more than Zombie Ward more than Eyeball Collection, in my opinion. Zombie Ward is more about, you know, part of farming, and maybe you show up to try to gank a lane, you use your red trinket, you sweep it, it was warded, okay, you couldn't gank that lane because the enemy warded. Oh well, too bad. You clear the ward, you leave a zombie ward behind, and you go back to farming. And now your lane that you tried to gank Okay, you tried to gank him, the gank didn't work, too bad, but at least you left a zombie ward behind to help them not get ganked by the enemy jungler. So overall, I think there's a lot of benefits to it. And here's the other thing. If you're stacking eyeball collect, let's say you take eyeball collection and you actually, let's say you're the kind of mastery player that loves to like play super aggressive early. You like to play like Elise. You like to just dive people after 3 camps and stuff like that. And you play super aggro and you're coin flipping fights every game, ganking and fighting constantly in the early game. Sure, you're probably going to stack eyeball collection fast in that early game if it goes well, right? Assuming you actually get kills and assists. But even in those games, you're probably already so ahead and you're going to be exploding people so quickly because you got that early lead and you're ahead of the enemy. Like, you already are so ahead, you don't need that extra like 2 or 3 AD you're getting from eyeball collection, right? Even when you fully stack eyeball collection with that 18 AD, like it's good, don't get me wrong, but it's not going to make all the difference really when you're already really ahead. With Yi, if you're ahead, you know, that extra AD, that little extra AD is probably not going to mean the difference between one-shotting and not one-shotting someone. Now, it's if you're behind, this is different. And I think Yi usually is behind early game, right? Most of the time, Master Yi is a scaling jungler that likes to farm and is not as strong early game compared to, you know, things like Lee Sin or Elise. They're going to usually be stronger early game. So most of the time, I'd say more than half the time, Master Yi mains are used to playing from behind. So if you're behind and aren't getting kills, eyeball collection is definitely not what you would want. But if you have zombie ward, getting a little bit of extra AD from clearing wards, which is can be a low risk thing, that actually does matter. Getting a little bit of extra AD when you're behind matters a lot more than getting a little bit of extra AD when you're already ahead. So I hope I explained that in a way that makes sense. But basically, whether you're ahead or you're behind, I feel like zombie ward is better than eyeball collection in both situations. The only time eyeball collection is better is if you're stacking, you get like 10 kills or assists really quickly early game, and you actually needed that little bit of extra AD to manage to, kill people. But like I said, if you're ahead with Yi, a lot of the time you don't. That little bit of extra AD wouldn't matter. And you're still missing out on the free vision of zombie ward if you took eyeball collection. So anyway, I probably sound really rambly and like I'm saying the same things over and over again here, and I'm not going to be, if you still think I'm full of shit and you don't want to take zombie ward and you like eyeball collection, that's totally fine. I just want to explain why I take zombie ward. I think the last thing I'll say about this that I think is really important to know about zombie ward is that you don't have to actually damage the ward yourself to spawn a zombie ward. You can get assists on a ward. So, for example, this is an example where you'd actually hit the ward. But let's say you're hitting a control ward and your enemy gets the last hit on it and kills the control ward. That still counts as a stack for your zombie ward, and it'll spawn a zombie ward. You'll get the credit. You don't need a last hit it. Also, if the ward is revealed if you reveal the ward either using Oracle Lens or Scryer's Bloom, which is the vision plant, the blue vision plant, or if you place a control ward that reveals enemy wards, that counts as you getting an assist on that ward, okay? So you don't even have to kill the enemy ward to get a stack from it. So what that means is if you use Oracle Lens and you reveal some wards, but you don't hit any of them, or maybe if you don't hit any of them and then they die while your Oracle Lens is activated, that'll count as you getting the stack on those wards. Like they'll turn to zombie wards and you'll get a stack. Same thing as if you use the Scryer's Bloom and reveal some wards and they die. Even if you use the vision plant on wards and then they die like 30 seconds later, sometimes it'll still give you the stack. It's kind of weird how that works, but yeah, sometimes you'll still get the stack on a ward you revealed, even if it dies like after you can't see it anymore. Same thing with if you put a control ward down and it reveals a bunch of enemy wards. Even if you don't kill those wards yourself, if the wards expire on their own while your control ward is revealing it, it gives you the stack. So this is probably sounding really complicated, and maybe you're totally like your brain is exploding from trying to understand everything I'm saying. But basically, it's a bit of a learning curve. You can learn how to abuse all of these tricks as you use zombie ward more often, but there's a lot of ways to stack your zombie ward, get your zombie ward stacks without having to even kill the wards yourself. And that's something you can look into if you want. But I use these tricks to get my zombie ward stacked faster. And a lot of the time at like objectives, when you fight over a drag or a Rift Herald or a Baron or whatever, there's usually like you can kill so many wards in those fights because people are just throwing wards down everywhere. Like there's a ward in every bush, there's tons of pink wards and stuff, and if you clear those wards either before or after the objective fight, you can get like 5 stacks in like 30 seconds. You can get a ton of stacks just like that. Of course, you just got to be careful that you don't bait yourself into inting to kill a ward and die for it. That's happened to me before, especially when I started using zombie wards, so I'm better at that now. I don't do it as much anymore, but yeah, just make sure you don't throw the game just because you're trying to get one zombie ward stack. It's not worth it. Alright, that's enough of that. Moving on. So people always ask me like, what are some general tips for climbing with Yi? And I'm always like, well, I don't know. Like, I would need to like look at your gameplay and figure out what's going wrong. What's actually holding you back. But I thought I'd give some kind of quick general advice about like what you're supposed to do in the early game. So I'll just jump into that. So I think what a lot of Yi mains don't, or just what a lot of people I feel like don't do, is to be, kind of get in your game mode, put on your game face. Starting from champion select, you're already thinking about what enemy champions you need to worry about and what champions on your team you want to think about. Like, do you have champions that are going to help you carry, or do you have champions on your team that you really need to get ahead or else they'll be useless? Like maybe you have an Ignite Renekton top who's, if they get behind, they're going to be giga useless against the fed enemy Camille. You want to be thinking about what is your win condition that game and what needs to be your kind of large scale, broad strategy going into the game. So before you've even loaded into the game. This is really important. The other thing is that usually, I think, like I said before, Master Yi is more of a farming champion, and that doesn't mean you cannot play aggressively with him early. In fact, some games I think you should play aggressively with him early, but as a default, he is a farming champion that if you farm well with, can carry games. He's one of the best champions to have gold on. Any champion in the game, he is one of the most like gold reliant and most most bang for buck in terms of getting gold on that champion and it translating into carry potential. So with Master Yi, usually you just want to farm well, and that will let you carry games. So early game, you want to prioritize clearing camps as efficiently as possible. I have made a video about the wolves clear, which is something I introduced into the Yi main community, and I know the Report Yi guy used that wolves clear, and I was the one who told him about that. People always ask me if I copied him, but no, he's the one. I told him about it. And other Yi mains have tried this clear. Some people really like it, some people don't, but I use it almost every game when I want to farm early game, which is most games. So the wolves clear, you can check it out on my YouTube channel. There's a video about it. You can go find it. But you can of course also do just the normal red start clear. Basically do whatever you think is going to be best for that game for helping you farm really efficiently in the early game. And this leads me to my next point of don't force low percentage plays. I think something I see a lot of Yi mains do, both in low and high elo, is they'll farm their red buff, maybe do one camp after or two, or do no camps after, and they'll go straight to mid lane or something and just sit in the bush waiting for something to happen. Now, I'm not going to say this is something you should never do, because if you actually are doing it with if there's a good reason for you to do it, let's say the mid lane matchup is super volatile, they're trading a lot, and you know that someone is about to die. You are 100% sure someone's about to die, or maybe the enemy jungler is about to gank them, then sure, you can go and hover there for a few seconds and wait for something to happen, and maybe it'll probably end up paying off. But I think most of the time, this is you forcing a play that is low percentage, which means it has a low percentage chance of being worth it. versus if you were to just go farm your blue side camps and get that guaranteed 300 golden experience. That's a higher percentage play, is that it's more likely to be something that's worth your time. Yeah, basically, just don't force plays that have a low percentage chance of being worth it. Have a really good reason if you're going to force something like that. Otherwise, it's much better to just stick to your default strategy of farming and clearing camps really efficiently, because Master Yi, most of the time, will be able to carry a game if he farmed well. Another really important thing I think a lot of people don't do, even high elo Yis, I see them all the time not doing this, is when the enemy jungler shows up on the map, you should immediately be looking to trade. And what I mean by that is, let's say the enemy jungler shows top and they gank your top laner. The moment you see the enemy jungler show up top lane, you should look to get something done bottom side of the map. That means you could gank mid or bot, you could invade the enemy jungler and take their blue side camps, you could take dragon while the enemy jungler is top, and of course you want to make sure you have lane prio for that. But yeah, just like in general, try to make something happen on the opposite side of the map the moment the enemy jungler shows up on the other side of the map, because that will help you punish the enemy jungler for showing up on the map, giving up their location. And even if the enemy jungler gets a good gank off top and your top laner's flaming you now and is put behind, at least you got something out of it. You got a gank bot, or you got dragon, or you got the entire enemy jungler's blue side camps, and then that's what helps you prevent the enemy from accelerating the game out of control to a point where you can't scale and carry it later. You'll at least be trading constantly, and you'll either get something that's almost as valuable as what the enemy jungler accomplished, just as valuable, or maybe even more valuable. Let's say the enemy jungler ganks your bottom lane and they get 2 kills, but you get Rift Herald, you dive top lane and get a bunch of tower plates. That ends up being worth way more gold than those 2 kills on the bottom side of the map that the enemy jungler got. So yeah, just the strategy of trying to trade early game. Don't let the enemy jungler just do what they want and you don't punish them for it. That's a really good way to let Yi and the rest of your team scale into the late game. I mentioned this, I just talked about this, but yeah, I think getting first Rift Herald is super important right now. And just generally, Yi is a champion that, like I said, loves having gold. Experience isn't necessarily super important on him, because he's a champion that does true damage, so getting levels is not going to matter so much as long as you have a lot of attack speed and AD for your E true damage. That's the way Yi works. He's different from other champions in that regard. Experience is still important, but not as important as just getting gold. If you can get as much gold as possible into Yi, he will really be in a powerful spot to carry, which is why things like getting the first Rift Herald is way more important than getting early dragons. Early dragons are really not that important. A lot of low elo players, even high elo players, will int and give up CS and experience in camps just to try to fight an early dragon. It's like a Cloud Drake. Like, who cares? Really not worth it. Getting a first Rift Herald. If the enemy jungler gets an early dragon, even 2 early dragons, but I got the first Rift Herald, I'm always happy. I'm always, it's always worth it to me, because if I use that first Rift Herald and get a bunch of tower plates and maybe even a whole tower, that's so much gold you and any your top laner or whoever you share the gold with, that's so much gold you get that lets you accelerate the game and get ahead, and you'll get all the dragons later on, at least in theory, right? So I think you really just want to prioritize getting Yi as much gold and resources and experience into him as possible, but especially gold. Gold is definitely the most important. And Rift Herald lets you do that. So don't freak out about early dragons. You can take an early dragon if it's free, why not? But don't int for an early dragon. It's almost never worth it. So yeah, that concludes this very long 50-minute video I have made. I tried to cover a lot of the things that people have kind of said they really wanted me to make videos on. Definitely feel free to leave suggestions or feedback, or comments in the comment section below under the video about things you want me to talk about, or other ideas for content I can make on this channel. I'll keep uploading YouTube stream highlights, of course, as usual. you can also check out you can see those highlights I'm posting live on my Twitch when I'm streaming at twitch.tv/wujusenchi. I don't have a regular schedule, but I try to stream whenever I can. I've got school, so my schedule is still a little bit erratic right now, but I try to stream whenever I can. I have a Twitter, twitter.com/wujusenchi. You can follow me there for low quality tweets. I also coach on metafy.gg, and you can sign up for coaching there if you're interested in doing coaching with me. And I do charge for coaching. However, if you are interested in a free 1-hour coaching session, I am doing a giveaway. And if you leave a comment below, that will count as you entering the giveaway. So, if you leave a comment below saying anything, ideally hopefully it's something that's not just a garbage comment. If you can say some kind of, like a, hey, good job, nice video, bro, or like, hi, or like, or maybe some, even better, some feedback of like, hey, here's an idea for some kind of guide you can make next. That would be really great. But, at the end of the day, any comment counts as an entrance into the giveaway, and the giveaway will end August 31st, which is 10 days from now. And it'll be a free 1-hour coaching session through Metafy. They gave me a code for a free coaching session, so thank you to them for making it possible. And hopefully I'll be able to see one of you in that free coaching session, and see y'all on Twitch and Twitter and in future YouTube videos and comment section and stuff. And have a good day. I hope this was helpful. And stay safe. Take care.